Jim, I gotta be honest. When you and I talked last week about the diesel spike, I thought maybe it would level off after a few days, but it's still climbing.
It is still climbing, Bernie. And the numbers coming in this week are brutal. The national average for on-highway diesel hit $4.86 a gallon. That is up from $3.29 just 1 month ago, a 33% increase in 30 days.
What, a 33% increase in just 1 month?
And here's what makes this different from every other fuel spike this industry has been through. This one didn't hit a healthy trucking market. It hit a market that was already on its knees.
You gotta be talking about the freight recession.
4 years, Bernie. 4 years of the Great Freight Recession. Spot rates that collapsed from $3.53 a mile in January of 2022 down to $2.28 a mile by mid-2025. That's a 40% drop in revenue per mile over 3 years. Insurance premiums up 40 to 50% over 5 years. And through all of that, carriers kept running. They parked trucks. They cut drivers. They scraped by on margins so thin you couldn't slide a piece of paper under them.
And then the surge in diesel prices when the Iran war starts.
Yup. And then the Iran war starts, and diesel goes up $1 in a week. FTR Intelligence reported this week that the 1-week jump of 96 cents per gallon is the single largest 1-week diesel price increase ever recorded. The previous record was 74.5 cents during the Russia-Ukraine war in 2022. We just blew past that record by 20 cents.
Record-breaking in the worst possible way.
The worst possible way at the worst possible time for the worst possible reasons.
Okay, so how bad is the damage already? Are companies actually going under right now because of this?
They were already going under before this, Bernie. That's the part that people outside this industry don't understand. The bankruptcies didn't start with the Iran war. They've been piling up for 2 years. Yellow Corp, 30,000 jobs, gone in 2023. That remains one of the largest mass layoffs in American history. Then, in 2024, FMCSA data showed a 10% decline in the total number of motor carriers in the country. In the first half of 2024 alone, nearly 10,000 carriers closed their doors.
10,000 carriers in 6 months.
2025 got worse. STG Logistics, Standard Forwarding Freight, Elite Carriers, Dolce Truckload, Queen Transportation, VIB Trans. Those are just the ones that made headlines. Analysts estimated 5,000 to 8,000 trucking companies effectively exited the market in 2025 alone, the most significant capacity shakeout since deregulation in 1980.
And now diesel spikes on top of all that.
Now diesel spikes on top of all that. And real carriers, real people are saying things out loud that should make every driver and owner-operator sit up and pay attention. An owner-operator named James Hagan runs a company called Hell-Bent Express and told reporters this week, and I'm going to read this directly because it needs to be heard. He said, after 3 years of downturns, Hell-Bent Express doesn't have a year 4 left in it. It is now or never. That's why I don't sleep much at night these days.
That's a gut punch right there.
That is a real person, a real carrier, running out of Runway right now, and he is not alone. A trucking company owner in Lake Charles, Louisiana told reporters this week that diesel went up nearly $1 overnight. He said, since COVID, business was down with the fuel prices up, the insurance being up. We had to park quite a few trucks. Now, the economy was starting to pick up. We started hiring new employees, and all of a sudden, the spike in the fuel. Now, that really hurts.
You can hear it in those words.
You can, and the OIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, put it plainly this week. They said, with freight rates already low, a sharp increase in diesel can quickly eat up what little margin a small trucking business has left. Now, stick with me here, because in about 2 minutes I'm going to give you the specific list of what separates the carriers who survive this from the ones who don't. If you're an owner-operator or a small carrier, this next section is worth more than anything you'll hear all week. Don't go anywhere.
All right, Jim, break down the math for me on what this diesel spike actually does to a carrier's cost structure.
Here's where it gets real simple and real scary at the same time. Before the Iran war started, diesel was sitting around $3.29 a gallon nationally. Today, it's at $4.86 and climbing. That is a $1.57 per gallon increase in 30 days.
$1.57.
At 6 miles per gallon on a Class 8 truck, That $1.57 translates to about 26 cents more per mile in fuel costs. On a 500-mile run, that's $130 more per load. In fuel alone, just fuel.
And these guys are already running on razor-thin margins.
The American Trucking Research Institute puts fuel at about 21% of total cost per mile. The South Carolina Trucking Association said this week that most trucking operations have 25 to 35% of their total costs wrapped up in fuel. And net profit margins for small to mid-sized carriers? 3 to 5% in a good market.
So a 20+% increase in your single biggest expense
Wipes out your entire profit margin and then some. That's not an exaggeration. That's arithmetic.
So what does it actually take to survive this?
That's the right question. And the answer is, it depends entirely on which side of 5 specific lines you're standing on. Real quick, if this information is hitting home for you, hit that subscribe button right now. This channel exists for one reason: to give the people who keep America moving the straight truth that the mainstream media walks right past. Every week, no spin, no agenda, just what truck drivers and carriers need to know. Hit subscribe and you won't miss a single one. Now, let's talk about who survives. The 5 lines that separate survivors from failures. Carriers that survive fuel spikes have enforceable fuel surcharge mechanisms tied to the Department of Energy's weekly diesel price index written into every contract. Every single one. Not a handshake, not an understanding. In writing, indexed to the DOE number, automatic adjustment.
And carriers that don't have that in writing,
they eat the cost until they can't anymore. A logistics professor at the University of Central Arkansas said it plainly this week. The question is, which companies cannot survive until they are able to raise their rates? That answer is the ones without surcharge protection locked into contracts.
And there's a lag even when you have the surcharge.
There is. Prices spike today, your adjustment kicks in 1 to 2 weeks later. When diesel is moving 50 cents a week, that lag still hurts. But having the mechanism is the difference between painful and fatal. The carriers that make it through fuel spikes are the ones that have enough cash on hand to absorb 4 to 8 weeks of elevated costs while rate adjustments and surcharge mechanisms catch up. If your operating account can't cover a month of running at current fuel prices without a rate increase, you are in a dangerous position right now.
Most small carriers don't have that kind of cushion.
Most don't. That's the hard truth. And the carriers that built cash reserves during the post-COVID boom and held on to it through the freight recession, they're the ones still operating when this shakes out. Big carriers, Werner, J.B. Hunt, the major fleets, they hedge fuel costs using futures contracts. They lock in prices weeks or months in advance. When diesel spikes, they're partially protected because they already bought fuel at a lower price on paper.
But most small operators can't do that.
Fewer than 15% of trucking companies actively hedge fuel. The other 85% are buying at the pump at whatever the pump says today. No buffer, no protection, full exposure. And right now, full exposure means $4.86 a gallon and climbing. This one is underrated. Carriers that invested in newer equipment, aerodynamic improvements, and route optimization software are getting 7 miles per gallon instead of 6. That single mile per gallon difference saves you about 7 cents a mile at current fuel prices. On a 100,000-mile-a-year truck, that's $7,000 a year per truck. For a 10-truck fleet, $70,000 a year just from 1 mile per gallon improvement.
The guys running old iron are getting hammered harder.
Old iron with poor aerodynamics, worn injectors, and no telematics running at 5.5 miles per gallon in this market is a slow-motion bankruptcy filing. The efficiency gap between well-maintained modern equipment and neglected older trucks has never been more expensive than right now. This is the one that kills carriers quietly, and nobody talks about it enough. When fuel spikes, not all loads are equal anymore. A load that penciled out at $3.50 diesel might be a money loser at $4.86. Carriers that survive this are the ones who know their cost per mile to the penny and are willing to say no to freight that doesn't cover it.
That's hard to do when you need the cash flow.
It's the hardest thing in trucking. Turning down a load feels wrong when the truck is sitting, but hauling at a loss is worse than not hauling at all. Carriers who chased volume at unprofitable rates during the freight recession are mostly already gone. The ones still standing learned that lesson the hard way. Now they need to apply it again.
Jim, there's one more thing I want to ask you about before we wrap this up, because there's actually a silver lining buried in all of this that I don't think most people are seeing. Can you explain that?
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive. Stay with us. Here is the part nobody wants to say out loud, but it's true. Every carrier that fails because of this diesel spike takes trucks off the road, and trucks coming off the road means capacity tightens, and capacity tightening means rates go up for the carriers that survive.
So the survivors actually benefit from the failures.
They always do in this industry. It's brutal, but it's how the market works. FTR Intelligence reported this week that their Trucking Conditions Index, which measures how favorable the environment is for carriers, hit 9.3 in January, the best reading in 4 years. The spot market is already tightening. Flatbed rates hit their highest level since October 2022 this week. Total spot rates are 15% higher than the same week last year. Load postings are 39% higher year over year.
So the recovery was actually starting.
The recovery was starting. And here's the hard truth wrapped inside that good news. The carriers who make it through this diesel spike are going to step into a tightening market with pricing power they haven't had since 2021. If you survive the next 90 days, the market on the other side of this could be the best operating environment in 4 years.
That's worth fighting for.
That is absolutely worth fighting for. Here's where I land on all of this. 4 years of the freight recession already separated the disciplined operators from the ones running on hope. This diesel spike is the final exam. And just like every exam, some people pass and some people don't. The ones who don't make it, they weren't bad people and they weren't bad truckers. Most of them were hard-working men and women who got hit by forces completely outside their control. A pandemic, a market flood, a war in the Middle East. Nobody planned for all of that hitting at once. I understand that. I've been in this industry long enough to know that sometimes the deck is just stacked against you and there's nothing you can do about it. But there are things you can do right now, this week, before this gets worse. Get your fuel surcharge language in every contract today, not next week, today. If a shipper or broker won't agree to a DOE-indexed fuel surcharge in writing, that is not a partner. That is a liability. Know your cost per mile to the penny at $4.50, $5, and $6 diesel. Run those numbers today. If any of those scenarios puts you underwater, you need to know that now so you can make decisions before the bank account forces the decision for you. Park trucks before you run them at a loss. A parked truck costs you fixed expenses. A truck running at a loss costs you fixed expenses, plus the loss on every load. Parking hurts. Running at a loss kills you faster. And if you're watching this and you're already past the point where any of this helps, if the numbers just don't work, and you know it, make a clean exit before the creditors make it for you. Protecting your CDL and your personal credit is worth more than fighting a war you cannot win. This industry will come back. It always does. And when it does, it needs experienced, hardworking, professional drivers and carriers ready to move freight. That's what this channel's about. Giving you the truth so you can make the best decisions for yourself and your family. Drop a comment below right now and tell me what diesel is running in your area today. I want to know what you're seeing out there on the road. Hit the like button if this helped you. Subscribe if you aren't already, and share this with a driver who needs to hear it. I'm Jim Campbell. Stay safe out there. Keep the rubber side down.